All right, let's throw you guys into caster mode here. Now spawning in on the northeast side of the map, playing as Holy Roman Empire again, even though the game is paused to not let the stuttering happen. You're going to see that prelate spreading the word of their Lord Jesus Christ. It is GiveUAnxiety. And who do we have over here on the west side?
On the west side, in the color red, playing as the Malians, it's ISanych. Which always sounds like Ice Age to me.
Yeah, it makes me think of the I'm gonna sound terrible, but I've never seen Ice Age before.
Neither have I.
Oh, okay.
It's okay. You and I in solidarity. Chat's probably losing their mind right now, but you know, we're okay with that.
Yeah, I don't like winter, man. I don't like when it's cold outside.
So you just won't watch any movies with winter in them?
Yeah, I just don't want to get reminded of winter, you know?
We had snow here. I for not to dox myself, but I do live in the Pacific Northwest, and we are supposed to be well into springtime by now. And we had snow here yesterday, and I was very unhappy to see that.
Yeah. Actually where I am also we had a little bit of snow, and on the 10th of March, not very welcome, that's for sure.
No. Not. I was like, this is past. You had your time. If you were gonna snow, you should have done it in January. It's like, you know, you're talking to a little kid. If you were gonna go to the potty, you should have done it when I asked. Now you've lost your chance. You know? If you were gonna snow, you should have done it when it was actually winter. Now you're not allowed.
That's right. That's right. ISanych playing as the Malians, like we said before, on the southwest, having 6 little Malian houses with his pit mine, getting that extra passive income. And my question to you, how much Malians have you seen over the past week or two? Because there's been some interesting Malian builds coming out.
Dude, a lot. Like, the Malians have been such a crazy civ. Like, I'm going to get sidetracked for just a second. We see an Akin Chapel being dropped for GiveUAnxiety. That's whatever. We don't care about that. What I want to talk about is, holy cow, the Malians. Okay, they came out last October, right? And for a while, well, okay, so they came out in beta, and they were busted. They were absolutely insane because poison arrows stacked infinitely. They nerfed that, and then Malians were kind of like, what? Nobody really knew what to do with them. They were kind of garbage tier for a little while. Then people discovered the Farimba Garrison. They were pretty good. And then they fell off, and now they're back. But then, like, the last week, now they're just, like, A tier. Like, I'm seeing them in a ton of games played over on EGC during Golden League, partially because of, you know, the rule set that they're playing with over there, but also just because I think people are really discovering the niche that they fit into and the way that they can be played. They're not so one-dimensional with just the Farimba Garrison rush anymore, and there's a lot more, you know, variability. And I think the really cool thing about the Malians that a lot of people slept on for quite a while, and I think part of what made them so difficult to understand, was that their counter system is completely different from the rest of the game, right? Almost every other civ in the game has like this inbuilt counter system of like, you build, you know, man-at-arms, so I build crossbows. You build horsemen, so I build spears. This is like, it doesn't really work that way with the Malians. Like, their crossbows are melee crossbows. Their counter to ranged units are javelin throwers that nobody else gets. And so when you're able to like read your opponent's build and kind of counter that ahead of time, I feel like the Malian counters are kind of stronger than any other counters in the game, and that just makes them hit really hard if you're able to get, you know, the right build off.
Yeah, I mean, it adds some added difficulty to it, but a little bit of reward if you make the right decision. One of the builds that I've seen that I'm assuming ISanych is going for right now is using warrior scouts. Getting scouts in. I actually don't see a stable for an upgrade for him yet, but a lot of the times I've seen some pro players going warrior scouts in feudal age and going professional scouts, getting some of these deer patches, which could be really good against an HRE player just because they need those outside food sources, and especially with HRE GUA going for that second town center, using that Akin as the drop-off point, he's going to need that extra food and a place to put a town center.
Yeah, we do see the stable finally thrown down now. No warrior scout upgrade coming in just yet, but it is dirt cheap. There we go. It's coming in right now. So cheap, right? So it's almost like a waste of time not to pick it up. Even if you have no plans on using it, just making your starting scout like a tiny bit tankier almost always seems like it's worth it. What you don't want to do is engage with your scouts and get them killed right before the warrior scout upgrade comes in. So there we go. That's better. Now you can fight.
Yeah, obviously it's not a good idea. GUA, just because of how many villagers are on that town center, will go up eventually, of course. But do want to have a shout out to Kimolol, raiding with a party of 97. Hi, everybody. The voice that you're hearing is 10-4-Tim. The other voice is the voiceless one, so, ironically. And we're coming to you with the Genghis Khan Legacy main event. We're seeing a best of 3, which goes into the top 4 between ISanych and GUA. This is game 1. Even though this is one game, the town center of the second variety is going to go up for GUA, getting that deer patch really nice. And will help him on the villager count. A lot of times for the Malians, just because they have so much passive income everywhere else, they're doing things like adding these pit mines over by the south here. They're going to be doing things like adding cattle farms for that excess food per minute. GUA needs to have more villagers in order to compete.
He will. And the other thing that we're noticing that's interesting is that we got warrior scouts out, like I mentioned, because it's so cheap. But we only made 2 scouts, and there is no professional scouts follow-up. No mill was ever thrown. I guess it's a granary, but no granary was ever used to pick up that professional scout. So we got the 2 warrior scouts out, did a little bit of harassment, picked up a free villager kill. That's nice. But now the stable has transitioned fully over to sofas. We are full sofa production out of that stable at this point. And there is no interest whatsoever so far from ISanych in going up to castle so far. He will be spending all of his, his food getting out these sofas as fast as they possibly can.
Yeah, that stable looking more like a Serta store than anything else. The sofas coming out now in feudal age, not too strong, just because only having 2 melee and ranged armor and only having 155 health. But once you get to Castle Age is when they get super strong with their imported armor. And actually they're going to be doing a good job against the knights that GUA does if he chooses to make them in Castle Age.
That's the really big point here, though, about the Malians, is that they don't... the GiveUAnxiety does not get knights until the Castle Age. So these sofas that ISanych has chosen to go for, they beat horsemen until knights come out. And they even trade decently against knights, but that's a different discussion. So as far as the feudal age goes, ISanych loves staying in the feudal age right here because he's keeping GUA from picking up any relics or any sacred sites, which is a win for him. And he knows that as long as he continues to build these sofas, he can beat out horsemen in a trade. So you go sofa, archer, and that should beat out horseman, spearman, which is what GUA is going to naturally lead into as the Holy Roman Empire. He's not getting a lot of damage done here, right? Because he's trying to torch down a house that's just going to be emergency repaired back up. But if he can continue to draw out this feudal age, he's going to make GUA more and more uncomfortable. This is where the Malians are happy in this matchup, and it's where the Holy Roman Empire is very uncomfortable in this matchup.
Yeah, hanging out in feudal age really isn't what a Holy Roman Empire player wants to do. And especially because of how good ISanych is doing in terms of his raiding skill. For GUA, his map spawn not as good as it was the first time around that we saw in the first game, just because those gold mines, they're pretty out there and they're pretty raidable areas. And GUA has to add an outpost, hopefully with arrow slits or making a springald tower in Castle Age to try to maintain some of that gold production, because he's got the food pretty much down with the second town center having a deer patch and he has the berries right next to it, but that gold is the reason why he's not up.
Yeah, I'd like to see ISanych kind of group up his troops. He's kind of got all sorts of stuff going on all over the map. If he kind of just grouped up, he actually has a military mass that is superior to that of his opponent. If he just kind of ran in here with those sofas and tried to maybe raid this wood line, hit some of these extended villagers, things like that, he might be able to get a little bit more damage here. But as it stands, these military units that he's producing are not getting a ton of value. GUA, while he has, been slowed in his race to Castle Age by being forced to react to the efforts of ISanych, is not entirely deterred. He's on his way up. It's slower, but he's still headed where he'd like to be. And ISanych has fallen quite a bit behind in terms of heading up to Castle Age, because he's, he doesn't want to. He'd like to stay here in feudal, but unless you can do some damage, GiveUA is just going to go up anyway.
Yeah, I mean, ISanych obviously knows that. He sees how many villagers are on gold right now, but those archers getting a little big for their britches. Looks like they did take down an HRE villager, but will cost them their lives, and the sofas will be going down if they don't escape, which they do. Military count 17 to 13 in favor of ISanych. And you're right, I mean, it's all about ISanych staying in feudal. We can see his queues on all of his military production buildings. He has 3 stables going, pumping out as many sofas as possible, where GiveUA has to go kind of toe this line of, I need to make enough military to make sure my villagers don't die, but not enough to the point where I can never go to castle again.
Tiny little nitpick. With the amount of rating we've had so far in this game, I'd love to see both of these guys pick up textiles. Neither one has done it yet. It's giving me a little bit of a headache, but that's okay. We'll move past that for the time being. Lots of villagers going to be pushed away and going down here. ISanych finally getting the raid that he was looking for. GiveUA had pushed out with his troops, trying to put on a counterattack, and was heavily punished for it. Everybody pushed off of gold, and he is 23 gold short of being able to go up to Castle Age. That hurts just a little bit.
It's so frustrating. And, I mean, now he has enough to go up to castle, and I'm sure he'll hit the button as soon as he can. The issue is he's going to need gold throughout the entirety of the game, and does put the Regnitz Cathedral down on the north side of his map. While this feudal age battle that GiveUA is actually taking, Spearman trying to get around, do some good hits on the sofas, but I think there's enough spears to actually take down all of this furniture, but the archer's doing a good job of microing onto those spearmen. Now there are no spearmen left, only 1 horseman left. That will go down eventually. Military count 21 to 6, and ISanych actually taking a commanding feudal age victory.
I'm really not sure about that engagement from GiveUAnxiety. Obviously, hindsight 2020, it's really easy for me to say that after the fight's over, but it's kind of a golden rule. You do not fight while you're aging up because you're about to get superior units over your opponent. Why take a fight on even ground when you're about to get an advantage? It feels like you're throwing that away, and that's what we saw right there. Everybody going down means this gold is going to be idled out, potentially could pick up this villager trying to wall in, definitely going to kill this outpost. No emplacements or reinforcements going to come in. Potentially 4 villagers going to go down as soon as that baby gets burned down. So ISanych looking pretty good off the back of that castle age. GiveUA did get to the age he'd like to be in, but he's hurting now after he lost a bunch of that military. Oh, I forgot about emergency repairs. Oh.
I didn't want to interrupt you, but I was like, oh, he's just gonna repair that thing. So that is gonna help him, obviously, for the time being. I thought in that initial engagement that GiveUA had enough spears at that time, but the archers did a good job of just microing around, and it was essentially more of a micro win, if anything else. But you're right, GiveUA is in Castle Age right now, which is all well and good, but I feel like this is a trap that a lot of players go for against Mali, and especially used to be before with the Farimba garrison, is they would get up to castle, but all the units that they would pretty much make in castle were the same units they'd be making in feudal anyway. So it's kind of a headache.
Going to be picking up in even more kills here, and ISanych really impressed with the amount of damage he's been able to do onto GiveUAnxiety, losing quite a few villagers here. Gonna be, trading out pretty efficiently with these military units of his own. He is down a town center though, so that's not putting him in the lead, that's keeping him even. Obviously, there's still a villager deficit, but as we mentioned earlier, the Malians able to get so much passive income that they are, I'd consider them at somewhat of an even point in the game at this point as things stand. But I think ISanych needs to kind of make a decision here. I don't think he's going to realistically be able to raid and keep himself here forever. I think he's going to need to throw down a second town center or go up to castle or, pivot in some way, because this feels like delay tactics, not something that's going to end the game for you.
Yeah, and he might end up going to a castle eventually just to compete and then have those sofas that are as good as they are. And maybe make GiveUA not only make spearmen, but might, as an HRE player, maybe get some ranged units. I haven't seen an HRE archery range probably since this game's inception, but maybe we might see in archery range. But now that ISanych backs up just a little bit, Regnitz Cathedral pumping out Prelix, this could be GiveUA's time to actually pick up a relic or two, fill some of those outposts.
Yeah, we also have some deer being picked up in the corner. A lot of villagers transferred over there, throwing down 2 outposts, trying to keep everybody safe. But he's picking up those deer because he's not got a lot of wood. His wood has been harassed pretty consistently, and he has not been able to make the farm transition that you would normally like to see as a Holy Roman Empire player. So going to be moving out, potentially making himself vulnerable to pick up those deer, delaying that farm transition. But I like this as a gamble. I don't think ISanych has scouted that they're up there just yet, but he's about to. He's got a shift click of sending up those sofas. He's about to see, not going to be able to make it through, actually. Well done throwing those walls up by GiveUAnxiety, but he will know that they're up there, potentially going to be able to raid them in the future. In the short term, though, going with the Farimba garrison, what we generally tend to see from these Malians, it's just so powerful. The Grand Fulani Corral not really able to compete in terms of power, even after the landmark changes. Farimba garrison just looking real strong. So that's where we're going to see ISanych going up to feudal, or excuse me, up to castle, and also floating quite a bit of wood here. Maybe going to be able to throw down a siege workshop, get out something here that can help him break down some of these towers. I'm not sure, but I'd like to see that macro get balanced just a little bit better. Might help him to get out a little bit more military production.
Yeah, I agree, especially because, I mean, most of the things that he's producing, if we could take a look at the stables, basically just producing sofas that are 120 food and 60 gold. So probably maybe a little bit of a macro issue, just having more on wood that he might necessarily need to. Maybe he thought about going cattle farms and adding some nice delectable beef products, but doesn't end up getting the opportunity to do so. Meanwhile, throughout the entirety of the map, as ISanych just hits Castle Age, he's been sending units around the relics, knowing that GiveUA really wants them for that Regnitz Cathedral. And he's done a good job making sure GiveUA has not gotten any relics so far, even though he's been in castle for about 4 or 5 minutes now.
Well, a couple spearmen came in, tried to harass some villagers here underneath the pit mine of the Malians. They immediately turned around and pulled their shivs out. You came to the wrong house, fool! And all of those spearmen end up going down. So not exactly the trade that GiveUA was looking for when he went in underneath there. But we did see that ISanych also threw down an additional 2 archery ranges. So, and he actually is producing archers out of them. This is not for javelin throwers. So I'd love to see poison arrows picked up so that those archers are getting that a little bit of extra damage on all of their trades. As it does look like ISanych, now that he's gotten up to Castle Age, is looking to transition into a range play. Maybe some donzos or sofas to support them against these horsemen that are coming out. But yeah, this is go time for the Malians. They really need to deny map control from the Holy Roman Empire so that these relics and sacred sites don't get picked up for free.
And as these upgrades are coming in for ISanych, I mean, he's been doing a pretty good job. But that passive income really working out for him. And ISanych, if he does add poison arrows, quite expensive technology. I just wanted to allude to it. 175 food, 500 gold. It will help those archers maybe combat some of the horsemen, because there are, I mean, when you're making archers, the counter unit is already here. There are horsemen here, but it might be able to help them out. But now that the sofas can really hold their own, they get a comforter on their mattress. What looks like as well, with the imported armor getting +2 melee and ranged armor, makes them a little bit tankier. And the veteran archers, with the only +1 upgrade, actually doing a pretty decent job against these horsemen that are still in feudal for GiveUA.
Yeah, there has been no armor picked up for these horsemen, which is, you know, really going to make them suffer against this many archers. Obviously, horsemen's supposed to be the counter, but when you've got a critical mass of archers and no ranged armor on your horsemen other than what they come with, that is a trade that you can make, especially if you start to mix in some javelin throwers as well, just because javelin throwers have such a high base damage. And the veteran sofa to provide a front line and a little bit of extra attack is going to make a big difference as well. Between the natural armor upgrades and imported armor, those sofa will now be able to just rip through those horsemen and can even stand toe-to-toe with knights. So this is actually a really good spot in terms of army composition for ISanych to be in. He'd love to get his army all grouped up and make a push underneath one of these town centers maybe. But yeah, he's feeling good right now. His army, in terms of quality, is much better than that of his opponent.
Yeah, the quality and the quantity, of course, is better. Military count 41 to 20 in favor of ISanych, to the point where he didn't have to group them, but now he's going to pay for it in a big way. We have an archer ball of about 10 to 15 archers getting encircled by horsemen. They will be going down one by one. On the flip side, GiveUA adds some siege superiority with a mangonel, gets a good hit on a lot of those veteran archers. Let's see if that mangonel can actually get a good shot off. Second shot off, about 6 to 7 archers dead. Not really a lot of defense against some of those spearmen now. But that mangonel does go down. He paid for it. Did pay off.
Yeah, mangonel definitely made itself get worth there, but on the other side, there were a lot of villagers went down here. You can see blue corpses all just kind of disappearing now, as there were a lot of them littering this wood line. 19 villagers killed so far in this game for ISanych, and the count continues to rise as even more, you know, troops stream in. Not everybody able to crowd into that outpost, and the poor villagers left out to dry. Hold the door! They're not going to be able to get in. They're all going to go down to these sofas that are raiding GiveUAnxiety to death. Despite the extra town center, he has really struggled to keep these villagers alive.
Yeah, there's so much idle time going on. We have 30 idle villagers right now, and that doesn't count the ones that are currently running for their lives. So many worker kills for ISanych, 33 worker kills to only 1 for GiveUA, and now GiveUA only has an economic lead of about 12. But the issue is all of this passive income from ISanych. I'm seeing the 3rd gold mine also on the west side getting picked up for him, also having some good gold per minute, just enough to help carry him in the sofa department, because surprisingly, as far as gold goes, he's not using a lot of it with his current composition.
No, and the other part about that is that even though there is still an economic lead in theory for GiveUAnxiety, with so many of them constantly idle and running for their lives, that ISanych is actually in the economic lead right now between passive income and the constant idling of his opponent. Now, with a military count of 34 to 19, that was an excellent mangonel shot. A lot of those sofas getting quite beat up, but you're going to have to hug this mangonel if you're GiveUAnxiety. You step out of position for 1 second to try and engage these sofas, and it's real easy to dive this thing and take it out. So this is a razor's edge that GiveUAnxiety is walking on here, trying to keep himself alive. That is not going to get anything, that Wololo, but just a preventative, trying to keep him from diving those villagers. As the fight continues to break out here, more and more reinforcements pouring through for ISanych, almost double the military of his opponent, and that mangonel is going to go down. All of these archers here on the backside going to be doing tons of damage to these horsemen. They still, okay, they finally did pick up their +1 in the ranged department, but still, you can see how fast they're all going down, notwithstanding that ranged armor. And that poison arrows did get picked up as well for those veteran archers, so they're going to be even more deadly against these villagers. So many of them dropping. Now 50 villager kills going down for GiveUAnxiety, and I think if he chooses to, he could just permanently idle the food eco here and just kind of bleed his opponent to death.
Oh yeah, because of how much ranged armor these veteran sofas have. They can sit under a town center. They're completely fine with it for how long it takes. More raids going on the north side. GiveUA doing a good job with the relics, putting them in outposts, making sure he's getting the spring golden placements and emergency repairs going up on them as well. But you're exactly right with the food income of GiveUA. It kind of resembles somewhat like English, honestly, in the Castle Age, where these farms, I mean, you can't pick them up and move them. As long as you're around this area, he's never going to be able to get food. And as you can see on the top right part of your screen, 7 food, and the food per minute is very low.
Yeah, it's dropping constantly because there's nobody gathering it. The only source of food of people gathering that's keeping that afloat for the time being were the villagers that had transferred over to the deer in the top right. That's exhausted now, so there is not a whole... Oh, I guess... Oh, there's this handful of villagers gathering berries unnoticed here in the middle of the map that ISanych hasn't noticed so far, but that is not enough to sustain military production to stand up to ISanych. We got 41 to 16, and yeah, like I said before, I think you just continue to idle and bleed your opponent dry. They're never going to be able to catch up to you. Your eco is completely untouched, and barring a huge misplay from ISanych, I don't see a real great way for GiveUA to come back into this game.
No, I don't either. I mean, it's going to be incredibly difficult for him to do that, and ISanych doing the correct thing, also up north adding a siege workshop. That was probably the only thing that he was really missing. GiveUA making mangonels, continuing to try to find an answer for this archer mass, And instead of Spearmen, I also see in the queue for him going for Men-at-Arms instead.
GiveUAnxiety's, the jig is up. ISanych knows about these villagers, or maybe he just passing. Not gonna fight them, kill them. Okay, we'll just let them live. We're more interested in neutralizing this sacred site here.
I mean, the sacred site's important too. You know, it's kind of a thing. I think ISanych did not see them though, as you can see these sofas rotate pretty much all the way out. Looks like he's going more so for the base. But now with that siege workshop for ISanych plus a couple houses, probably going to restructure his macro to get a little bit more wood. Maybe we'll see some trebs coming out, and hopefully for ISanych maybe some stone also, because you know me, I'm always looking for a face cube.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I would do. I don't see a point for Springolds here. This Mangonel is not a real threat to you. If you are, just careful about your archer positioning, you can build trebs and just end the game here. Whereas the Mangonel is addressing the symptom, not the problem. Not the disease, I guess, is what that phrase. He's addressing the symptom, not the disease. So as long as you can get out some trebuchets and just push down everything here, then I think ISanych should be feeling really good.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I mean, the way this is set up, the way GiveUA's base is set up right now, is he doesn't want to come out of his base. He's kind of doing a little bit of that shelling and a little bit of turtling because he's wounded. He's got to lick his wounds. He's got to get enough villagers. He's got to get his economy kind of underway. And also completing some raids over here on the south side. This gold mine largely unprotected from ISanych, so that will have a couple worker kills. But when the worker kill count's already 62 to 3, it's kind of, not doing as much.
No, this is a distraction for ISanych, nothing more. Especially because those military units are out of position, more and more villagers for GiveUAnxiety are going down on the other side of the map. So that's a trade that ISanych will take every single day of the week. In terms of those military production, or excuse me, the siege production that we got out here, we do get one Mangonel to try and keep any ranged units at bay, and now we're going into the ram dance, going to make sure that these battering rams can push down this extra town center. And I don't see a big way for GiveUA to kind of take these out. I mean, he can dive with some horsemen, but as long as there's a lot of protection here by these sofas, they can keep those horsemen off of the rams, and I think that's good night town center.
Yeah, with the army composition that GiveUA went for, it's a little lackluster, right? I mean, the horsemen, especially with the veteran archers having poisoned arrows, those things go down rather quickly. Did add some knights as well with the accurate upgrades, but I just don't think it's going to be enough for how many archers he actually has here. And these two rams are actually going to provide enough DPS for the town center to have to use emergency repairs, but you know as well as I know that emergency repairs is just temporary, and the town center goes down eventually.
Yeah, and there's nothing here that can really stop them. There is a decent military mass actually building for GiveUAnxiety, but if ISanych positions his army correctly, he should be able to keep these rams alive. The only thing that worries me is he has a propensity to split his army up. That's what's made him so successful at raiding all game long. But when it comes to these late game team fights, you need to have everything in one place, or a big dive from GiveUA can take out everything that's sitting here in the middle of the map, and you don't want that. That's a great way to throw your lead away if you're ISanych. So I'd like to see all 84 of his military units just group themselves right up, right underneath this town center, and fight together. The time for raiding has passed, in my opinion.
Yeah, and I mean, he did have a successful one on the east side. There were some berry bushes here that GiveUA has been trying to get, but now, I mean, it's essentially all of his farms have stabilized in terms of economy. His food per minute now at about 2,000, so he has been able to recover that pretty successfully. Now, for ISanich's goal, it's getting rid of these fortified outposts. They have their relics, they have their Springald emplacements. These rams left largely undefended with all of the horsemen and knights and spearmen. There's so many melee units that are going to be able to take that ram down, but ISanych going more of the ranged approach, having a trebuchet in the back instead.
Yeah, and that's really what is going to kind of push this game into overdrive, is that you can play the stalemate game of rams in, rams out, push, back and forth all day long, but as soon as you bring a trebuchet into the mix, GiveUAnxiety is on the clock. You gotta engage, or you gotta lose your buildings.
Yeah, I don't think as this big battle gets underway, I don't think ISanych was paying attention. Those Mangonel shots taking out maybe about 15 to 18-ish archers. There are so many spearmen out here going to be able to take out all of those sofas. There's a lot of fluff and stuff all on the ground as those mattresses just get disintegrated. Siege superiority for GUA. Those mangonels having good hits on those archers. ISanich's siege essentially turned to kindling. And GUA, that's a huge victory for GUA.
This is exactly what I was afraid of. We talked about this right before the fight broke out. ISanich's troops were all over the place. He didn't have them grouped. He didn't have his siege adequately protected. He lost a couple battering rams, and then the army came in and just cleaned the floor with all of those archers that were the bulk of what was defending the middle of the map there. And now look, the military count has completely flipped. GiveUAnxiety with the lead. He's trying to push in 2 battering rams on the left side by themselves, apart from some sofas to accompany them. I can't see how that's going to be super effective. He's going to kill some farms, but it's real easy for Lance Connects to clean up those battering rams with the high base damage that they do. And like I alluded to a couple minutes ago, ISanych just kind of threw his lead away. If he had grouped up his military mass, there was not a great way for GiveUAnxiety to engage, but he handed his opponent a ticket back into this game.
And although, I mean, ISanych did lose that battle, trying not to lose the war, he had a very successful raid on the wood line over to the east, and he got a lot of these farm villagers as well. Economic count 67 to 60, but we know now what building just popped up and how much all of those raids are not going to end up mattering as Palace of Swabia is coming out, cranking villagers out every 6 seconds.
And that was really, ISanych needed to push with his army as a group and end this game before the Palace of Swabia came out, because the Palace of Swabia has the power to negate all of that raiding that you did. You killed 99 villagers, but if the Palace of Swabia can print them out so fast that you can still outstrip your opponent in terms of eco, then all of that raiding will have been for nothing. And that's the game state that we've reached right now, where the Palace of Swabia is just going to chew through the deficit that ISanych was able to build through all of that raiding, and soon enough, ISanych is going to find himself down in age and down in villagers. And it's all because he just didn't group and finish off his opponent right there. He continued to just try and raid.
Yeah, I mean, for the Malians, you don't necessarily see them too much of being an Imperial Age Civ, especially with this build now. They try to take it to him in Castle, use that sofa spike in how good those sofas are, and end up kind of cascading the game from there. They do have the ability for the Malians to get a good trade network going, as all of the team players might know. Malian trade busted, blah, blah, blah. I've heard it in so many different Twitch chats. But it's going to take a while for that to actually get up and running to the point where it's not going to have enough time, because that Swabia is already bumping. It's already moving. All of GUA's farm economy has essentially stabilized, and now we're at the point where you're hitting that HRE Imperial territory where there's not many civs, and there's not many players that can even stand up to an HRE Imperial Age.
No, and that's exactly what GUA was banking on. He continued to stay in the game that long, hoping that he could get up to Imperial, produce as many villagers as he could possibly need, and then pull himself back into this game with favorable team fights, and that was the opportunity that ISanych gave him, and now he's going to take full advantage of it. This, Malian base is far less defended. There's far less outposts and extra town centers and things like that to keep his villagers alive as compared to the Holy Roman Empire. So these knights that run in here and horsemen are going to get their worth in gold cleaning up the villagers of ISanych.
Yeah, and I mean, ISanych hasn't gotten anything in the way of stone. He hasn't put in keeps out on these gold mines that he's been trying to collect from. So much idle time by ISanich's villagers. Gold mines getting raided in every department. While ISanych is trying to go through an army composition change right now, going into veteran Musafati warriors because of how many men-at-arms and how many knights he saw out of HRE. The problem is those Musafati aren't as good against horsemen as they used to be. Their base damage was cut down pretty considerably, and we can see, based on veteran Musafati, having 10 attack but plus 15 to heavy, so really good against knights and men-at-arms, not so much against horsemen, and they also lack in the speed category as well, so it's going to be very difficult for him to stop all of these raids from happening. And while I'm saying all of these sentences, GUA getting his elite upgrades, elite spearmen hitting the battlefield.
Yeah, this is starting to reach danger territory here. The army mass for GUA is still currently smaller than that of ISanych, but he will soon be able to outproduce ISanych thanks to his superior eco, that Palace of Swabia churning out the villagers over time. So ISanych is really on a clock to make something happen here. He's got to either, I don't know, find a way to throw down a bunch of town centers in order to keep up with GUA in terms of villager production, or he's got to end the game fast because the eco is turning against him with every passing second.
Yeah, and I think based on military numbers, he's going for the latter of what you said, with military count 93 to 67 actually in favor of ISanych. And it looks like right where that first battle took place, a second one might take place as well, as both of these players are massing up their units. Mangonel getting a good hit, and Mangonel's a really good counter against a Malian army because of how many foot soldiers they really have. We have elite units for GUA going right up against Musafati and Donzo alike up front. However, because of the poison archer mass all the way in the back, ISanych doing a good job of moving his archers around. GUA doing a good job of making sure that Mangonel actually stays alive, creates a little bit of quote-unquote idle time for those archers, but look at how quickly they take out these spearmen. The Mangonels end up going down. Those sofas are quite tankier than we might have thought they were. Huge victory for ISanych, and this was a Castle Age versus Imperial Age battle. ISanych got maybe about 20 deaths out of his army and continuously pumped in the background. GUA's on the back foot again.
Yeah, this is what I alluded to earlier in the game. If they're upgraded properly, Sofas can stand toe-to-toe with Knights. And the other thing that ISanych had going with him during that fight is that he was essentially running the hard counter to GiveUAnxiety's comp. He's got Donzos and Musafatis, which clean up the Knights, and he's got veteran archers to take out the pikemen, or spearmen of his opponent. And that's the hard counter to everything GUA was running. So he was perfectly poised in that fight to take the villager, or excuse me, to take the win. But that needs to translate into now is I want to see siege workshops dropped, and I want to see a push into the building immediately. You got to kill GiveUAnxiety fast.
Oh yeah, no, 100%. He has got to move. Very accurate analysis by you as well, because the economic count 115 for GUA, and even though he lost 99 villagers during this match, he still has a plus 45 just because of how good Swabi is. Defensive keep coming up for GUA. Let's see how good these mangle shots end up coming out. We've got 3 mangos. I don't think so either. No, he's got a lot of villagers over here. That is...
I guess if you pull your entire eco to make it happen, I suppose.
That's an upright GUA keep, an HRE keep, forcing ISanych to move in the opposite direction. His army has to retreat to the south. On the other side, GUA on the western side of ISanich's base has the presence of mind to continue raiding, forcing out that idle time. Now, we talked about GUA having the Palace of Swabia, and if he does get villagers raided, you know, not that big of a deal because he's able to pump them out. ISanych, different story. He doesn't have Swabia or a palace to go spit out villagers for. So every villager that ends up going down for him in terms of raiding, critical.
I'm still not seeing a siege workshop thrown down and any siege being produced. If you put it, I mean, if we had imagine 3 or 4 trebuchets that had been put into production just a couple of minutes ago, you would be feeling so good as ISanych right now. But the continued delay to get that siege out means that GiveUAnxiety is once again given a chance to stabilize. And, you know, he's doing counter damage. There's just this continued kind of stalemate of pushing back and forth. But as long as you're on 1 town center and your opponent is on what is effectively 4 town centers, 5 town centers? I can't remember. Anyway, they've changed the Palace of Swabia a couple times. That's never going to be a good trade for you long term.
Yeah. No, you're exactly right. GUA is going to continue to have siege superiority if he decides to take a fight. The really good thing that ISanych is doing, he has so many production buildings and enough passive income to the point where he can continuously pump out of them, as even though that battle initially went in favor of ISanych, he had maybe, you know, 60-some military units, he's now back up to 106. And GUA is adding more of a static defensive structures, adding bombard outposts, trying to go for raids instead of really closing the game out. And I think GUA, I mean, if GUA is able to get enough military, and because it's all Imperial, he can just really end up mowing ISanych down. It's just a matter of when.
I think GiveUAnxiety has recognized ISaNYch's reluctance to build siege, and he's literally building the hard counter to what ISaNY wants to do. Outposts with cannon emplacements are the you either build a trebuchet or you lose button, and ISaNY won't do it. And so he's never going to be able to wrest map control back from GUA if he won't kind of, you know, mobilize that sort of siege. These trebuchet, or excuse me, these mangonels are absolutely eating these poor archers alive, and there's no counter to it because we never saw any springlets.
Oh yeah, I mean, he turned that stealth forest into a graveyard with all of those archers. There's enough spearmen and land snakes around here. Land snakes, super good unit to a Malian melee composition, just because of the amount of damage that they can actually do to a land snake doesn't have the ability to. There are a lot of Donzos grouped up here. There's 22 Donzos here. Mangonels just having target practice. Look at this, just based on siege superiority, you see how effective that is to take down a Malian unit.
Look at all of them. Between the mangonels and the land snakes just chew through spearmen. And there is a sea of red on the ground there, and ISaNY finally throws in the towel. That was heartbreaking to watch. I know I said it so many times, but I felt like the game was in ISaNYch's hands, and he just let it slip away from him.
Man, that was target practice for those mangonels. That was absolutely
I need
incredible.
A kill counter. You know StarCraft has kill counters. You can see how many units they've killed. I need that for those mangonels in this game.
Oh yeah, I wish you could. If there was some kind of like promotion, like for how many units you kill, there's like a promotion or something like that. Those mangonels would be probably tanks at this point. But
I mean, even just a counter, like I mean, I'd love to see the prestige system from Command and Conquer put in here. That would be super awesome. But
right.
even just a counter like StarCraft has, where you can just see how many units have died to that particular unit. I think each of those mangonels probably has upwards of 20 deaths under their belts.
Oh yeah, for sure. And you can take a look as we're seeing some of the villager graphs right now. You can see GUA getting that boost, obviously, with the second town center, which helped him out in Imperial Age as well with the Palace of Swabia. You can see the slope of that line dramatically change, as all Palace of Swabias do. Now, taking a look at military count, GUA was always under the belt of ISaNY in terms of military. ISaNY was able to produce a lot more effectively, it looks like, than GUA does. However, based on that last battle, it came down to 99% the mangonel, and the other 1% having just a better unit. Having Imperial Age units against the Castle Age units of Mali just ended up taking it as well. We have game number 2 already starting on Basin. GUA playing as the Rus in the south. And who do we have in the north?
In the north, once again in the color red, playing as the Delhi Sultanate, it's ISaNY. And oh man, I love this matchup. I'm sorry, I cut you off just a little bit there, but I need to talk for just a second about how much I love Rus versus Delhi. This is such a fun matchup to watch, and it's because both of these civs want to be out on the map, and they want to do it early, and that leads to early conflict, and that's crispy for us as viewers, and it's fun for the players as well.
Oh yeah, I mean, honestly, these are probably my 2 favorite civs that I like to play on ladder. Watching them play against each other is a matchup that I'm obviously very familiar with, but for ISaNY, for the Delhi, Basin is a rather interesting and kind of favorable map for them just because of what you're seeing on your screen, having that sacred site right next to your starting town center.
And on top of that, with the new changes to Delhi, it's really easy for them once they make it up to Castle Age to take the middle sacred site, throw one of their super cheap keeps down on it, which also act as a town center, may I remind you. And then you've got 2 out of the 3 keeps already under your belt, and that just feels good as Delhi, as well as mid-map control with these big old golden stone mines. Like, you're sitting pretty if you can make that happen. And it's up to the Rus to try and keep that from happening. That's going to lead to some, I think, early aggression from the Rus, because if you don't, you're going to be hurting.
Yeah, absolutely. For the Rus going into Feudal Age for them, probably a little bit easier than some civilizations who try to get the ground going in feudal age when you're playing up against, you know, some civs like English, who your production is never going to be there against the Delhi player, making it Delhi favored. The Rus, because of their wood economy, their use of wooden fortresses, they can really create an archer ball, and that archer ball could do enough to try to stop Delhi. And for the Rus, having the ability to have knights in feudal age is going to really help them out. Now, ISanych knows this is going to be a feudal battle, knows there's a lot of battle of the basins soon to come in feudal age, and adds Tower of Victory as a result.
I love it. I love it. A lot of players would have gone for the Dome of the Faith here, trying to stretch this to a later phase, get you up to castle earlier. ISanych recognizes that his biggest weakness is going to be in feudal, recognizes that Rus have early knights, which can be difficult to deal with as Delhi Sultanate, and so he, you know, when you're at a high level of play like these two players are, a good question you want to ask yourself all the time is, how could I possibly lose? And then you counter that. Don't ask yourself how you want to win. There's a lot of ways you can make the win happen. You ask yourself what could happen to make you lose, and then you patch that hole in your defense. And that's what this Tower of Victory does. It gives him a little bit more strength in the feudal age at his weakest to try and help him make it up to castle where he's going to be nice and powerful.
And you're exactly right. On the flip side, what's going to help Rus a little bit in that feudal area is this particular landmark that GiveUAnxiety is going for, and that's the Kremlin, fitted with not only acting as a wooden fortress, as you can see on your screen, but you can make Kremlin gremlins, these little militia that you can spawn every 1 minute you pay a little bit of food to do that, and they have a 90-second time frame. Now, this Kremlin, a little bit far away from that sacred site on the basin, and I was kind of expecting maybe a second town center to come out from GUA, as we have a nice boar and a sacred site over here. Obviously, when you're watching a Rus player, you got to talk about your pork products, as we have 2 boar pretty much in the basin. It doesn't look like something that GUA might necessarily be going for, and is a little late to feudal age as well.
Yeah, I think that may be something that is on the cards for a little bit later, but I think GUA's immediate concern was getting up to feudal as fast as he possibly could. And so any concerns about trying to migrate guys over to stone to get a town center up early is a little bit put on the back burner, because he really wants this Kremlin to begin gathering those tickets. You know, until it's not up, until it's up, you don't gain those tickets. And so he wanted to get that up as fast as possible so that he has that panic button. He can call the gremlins as fast as he possibly needs to. And that's what we see here. On the other side, Delhi Sultanate going to be getting down a stable and an archery range. So immediately playing into what we talked about with that feudal aggression. And I think probably trying to pin the Rus player back into his map so that he can get that those sanctity and the scholars to capture the sacred sites.
Yeah, we can see the all-important technology sanctity going to be coming out at about 2 minutes and 13 seconds, depending on if any more scholars get created. One of the things of ISanych that he does really well that I want to take note of, as we see a scout trying to take down a mining camp, is he micros his scholars in the appropriate buildings for the units that he needs. We saw him go into the stable and make sure he got a horseman. Goes back into an archer range, gets an archer. What does he do as soon as you saw that on your screen? Has a scholar, puts it right back into the stable, pops it out of the archer range, and makes a horseman that way. That is, like, super high level Delhi play, especially at the beginning of the game. That is so important for the Delhi Sultanate to get map control and getting the best army composition it possibly can.
Yeah, that's what separates the good from the great in the Delhi, is the microing of your scholars to get the most out of them at all times. You put them in the mosques to get that research speed. You put them in the military production buildings to get the efficient production. Then you put them back in the mosques to get the research speed. You're always producing more, adding them in, and it makes it so that when you do go up to Imperial, those research upgrades don't take as long. A lot of Delhi players feel like they have to end the game in Castle because, you know, Imperial, the research upgrades take such a long time. But if you're able to, you know, micro your scholars and get them into those mosques and madrasas effectively, those Imperial upgrades don't actually take as long as a lot of people think they do.
Yeah, no, I mean, if you have a lot of scholars that are able to do that. And I think one of the issues for a Delhi Imperial is the fact that all of those scholars are going to take population space for you. You know, it makes you not have as much army as your opponent does just because of how quickly you get those researches. Obviously, it does have pros healing your units, like this Rus Horseman having 8 health after trying to take down an archer would surely love a feudal age scholar just to get that extra horseman, but that's just something that Delhi has that the Rus don't.
He has popped out his scholar from that mosque, going to slow down the research speed just a little bit, but that's because Sanctity has arrived, going to pick up the sacred site right next to his base, and now the Delhi Sultanate player, ISanych, looking to gather map control so that he can take the sacred site in the middle. That's his immediate short-term goal.
And there's going to be a huge issue for him to do that because GUA adding those feudal age knights, ISanych just put down a barracks, getting his feudal age spearman upgrade. But this is a very pivotal time for the Delhi player as that sacred site, his close sacred site, is getting capped in the north. That second one being all important. It doesn't have the army composition to really take any battles if you wanted to.
Luckily, though, with efficient production, you get those spearmen out real quick. I think it's something like 6 seconds, 5 seconds, I don't even know. But they're real fast. So you're able to get an army of spearmen printed and able to counter those royal knights very quickly. And so I think that was ISanich's plan, was to assess what his opponent was running and then use the efficient production of those scholars to get his counter army out as quickly as possible. Now that sacred site in the top left going to be neutralized pretty quickly. There is a horseman. Oh, wait! He said, oh, that's unlucky. You send the horseman to neutralize it, the one that has 8 health. Unfortunately, that means he will not be able to do a whole lot of brawling underneath that sacred site.
No, that horseman goes down pretty quickly. I mean, while the sacred sites are getting neutralized, they're still generating a little bit of gold. On the flip side, raid from GUA, some of those early knights on the east side, and just get 2 worker kills. Worker kill count 2-0. That it was first blood. And on the other side, ISanych on the middle sacred site, gonna end up capping that. Gotta remember, as those Delhi players, you're able to build walls. Might be a good idea to wall this one up.
He's going to be losing more villagers. They had moved out to the berries on the left-hand side here. No protection, no outposts, no walls, and that's going to result in about 7 or 8 dead villagers here underneath that mill. And all those knights going to get away with it because there's no way to chase them down with just these spearmen.
Yeah, really, really important for him to do that. And one of the issues for ISanych, because you're playing against Rus is going to have more scouts than you in Dark Age. Not going to have much in terms of sheep collection. As you can see, ISanich's town center pretty much devoid of sheep, so he has to go out to all of these berry patches, these deer patches. The problem for him is it's such a raidable territory, especially for those early knights. The only thing you really have is spearmen, but you know, you got to make sure the spearmen are actually there in time, to which it's impossible. They're on foot. Worker kill counts, he's getting another one. 9-0, 10-0. It keeps going up.
Yeah, that's really the rough part, and GiveUAnxiety has done an excellent job in recognizing this as a pressure point for ISanych. He wants to have his military in the middle so he can keep a hold of this sacred site, but at the same time, he needs to be able to protect his villagers that are moving out to outside food, sources, because he doesn't want to throw down farms right now. He wants to use these food sources on the fringes of the map. But you can't have your military in both places at the same time. So what does GUA do? He splits them up. He raids the villagers on the side while putting just enough pressure in the middle to keep making ISanych think he needs to leave some troops here. And that has put, a burden on ISanych. He doesn't have enough troops to respond to everything, and it's starting to form cracks in the defenses. 11 villagers. There's another raid going on in the west corner of the map. 12. All of these villagers are going to be going down. There's no way they make it to safety thanks to these archers. I think that was a misclick. They stopped to gather wood there. Not what ISanych, I think, wanted them to do. And yeah, we're up to 20 villagers killed now, which means GiveUAnxiety at only the 11-minute mark is approaching double the villagers of his opponent. That hurts.
Yeah, I mean, economy count 38-21 with 18 worker kills. GUA also hit the Kremlin Gremlin button, so a lot of the excess army that's in the middle where this sacred site was is getting decapped, and a lot of them ended up getting taken away. As you can see, these militia, I want to hover over it just because it's a new unit. Militia having that extra bonus to cavalry, so horsemen going up against them, probably not a good idea. And what's really nice about these militia is, as you saw a couple of them They just recently hit the ground and died, so they don't really care if they actually die or not. They get a villager, they get, you know, maybe 2 or 3. That's more than enough.
Yeah, and now a couple outposts using on the left side there being thrown up, trying to keep these villagers alive. It'll work in the short term, but the villagers are being idled, which means they're not gathering. And with only 22 villagers on the field, ISanych needs every single villager he can to be gathering, because the more time that 7 villagers spend not working, that's a third of your eco at this point, not working.
Yeah, I mean, because of how many went down initially, and more importantly, it looks like this sacred site from ISanych might end up getting decapped, which is going to be huge for ISanych. It looks like a couple horsemen and some archers over here as well. One horseman is not going to do it. We'll see if the other horsemen get there in time. If they don't, that's 0 gold per minute out of sacred sites for ISanych. And the Delhi Sultanate in the 13th minute, you're getting nothing from sacred sites, is a big deal. Obviously, we see he's nowhere to get to castle, and what is GUA doing? Adding the Abbey of the Trinity because his economy was essentially untouched.
Yeah, he was able to bank so much extra resources while raiding because he had produced an initial amount of military units to facilitate the raiding, and then he cut production for a good 3 or 4 minutes, gathered what he needed to get himself up to castle, and now he's feeling real pretty. ISanych has 57 food. At his current gather rate, he has 4 minutes before he can even begin to head up to castle, much less make it there. So, GiveUAnxiety has all the time in the world to pick up veteran upgrades, get his own monks out onto the field and pick up relics, pick up sacred sites, continue to produce superior military, and put ISanych out of his misery before he can make it up to Castle Age.
And he is going to do that rather effectively. The first thing he's going to go for is Knights, getting that that Knight upgrade from early Knights, excuse me, adding barracks as well, because one of the things that Delhi struggle against in Feudal Age is men-at-arms. They don't have any anti-armor kind of unit until you get to Castle Age, which ISanych is probably trying to stockpile for. The issue is, for how much time it's going to take him to do that, GUA is probably going to have an army to run him over, and that Castle Age is going to spell doom for him.
Yeah, I mean, the one good point that ISanych has going for him right now is he's recapped both sacred sites, which means he can put every single villager he has on food. He does not need to gather gold at this point, so he can become just straight onto food. He's got a lot of villagers gathering these deer. Unfortunately, did not pick up survival techniques, which hurts because not only is it free as the Delhi, it's a Dark Age upgrade. Or maybe Feudal Age. But either way, it only takes 1 minute and 15 seconds to research. That's so easy for you to get in a building like the mill, which is not doing anything else. So, unfortunately, going to be missing out on a real easy way you could be getting a little bit of extra food out of these villagers. And now they're being raided, idled once again. The Knights and Horsemen going to be diving underneath these outposts. Honestly, he's going to retreat and continue to put pressure on elsewhere. But if he really felt like it, he could just burn these down and kill the villagers inside. Because there's, you know, as long as they're sitting in there shooting, they're not gathering, and that puts ISanich's transition up to Castle Age further and further away. And these Knights, they're feeling real pretty underneath these outposts. They have 5 ranged armor at the moment, so they can sit under there all day.
Yeah, and I mean, with 15 idle villagers, that is essentially half his economy. GUA pumping out men-at-arms now with 5 ranged armor, making sure that no archer will be able to touch him from the Delhi Sultanate. A lot of spearmen over here on the west side got cleaned up by a Rus archer mass. Now with military count 25 to 19 in favor of GUA, a lot of these are Castle Age units. This is the time for GUA to really push and hammer it onto ISanych.
Yeah, and ISanych is in a really tough spot because he knows he cannot fight in Feudal Age against these men-at-arms and Knights, but he also has no choice because the only other option is to get raided to death, because he can't let his villagers sit in these outposts in order to keep them alive. They have to continue working. So you either make military and fall further behind in your transition up to Castle Age, or you don't make military and all your villagers go idle, so you can't get up to Castle Age anyway. This is just a noose, a stranglehold around the neck of ISanych, and GiveUAnxiety is not going to pull any punches. He's just going to continue to tighten and tighten until this game is just out of reach for ISanych.
Yep, first outpost going down, and the villager goes down because of it. Just want to take a look at how many units for ISanych it took to take down just one men-at-arms. There were 15 spearmen and a horseman there trying to take it down. Now, in a mostly spearman composition for ISanych and mostly archer composition from GiveUA, probably spells death for ISanych, just making sure you get some men-at-arms in there to soak up a little bit of that fire. The archers are microing the spearmen down pretty perfectly right now, and military count 27 to 16. It's another good skirmish for GiveUA.
And that, yeah, ISanych recognizes the writing on the wall. He's never going to make it up to Castle Age, which means he can never really take these fights. Wanted to try and stick it out for as long as he could because that was the end of this BO3 for him. But after the, that kind of game, you knew that it wasn't going to happen. GiveUAnxiety going to take it away from ISanych in 2, and that's going to be the end of this best of 3.
Oof. Yeah, it's a 2-0 for GiveUA. Take a look at that villager count graph. Man, just in that, once you got to about 8.5 minutes and those raids started happening, ISanych had to go out for some of those food sources. He just became so raidable. Those deer patches not really kind to him in terms of a spawn perspective. GiveUA's economic count, GiveUA's villagers basically untouched throughout the duration of this. It was able to castle before the deli, and in this particular matchup, seeing the Rus player get to castle while maintaining some kind of feudal army, assuming it's not a Rus fast castle, is bad for the deli player. It's not great.
That was really just, we didn't recognize it completely while it was happening, but in retrospect, GiveUAnxiety really kind of just put on a clinic there of how to counter the deli. Not as the Rus, but just in general. Every single thing you want to do versus deli, GiveUAnxiety was on top of it. He had the tech lead. He kept his opponent on the back foot, continuing to raid those vulnerable food sources. He denied the sacred sites. He kept his opponent from getting up a really nice big mass of archers or spearmen or anything like that he can take fights and secure the map with. He just kind of ran the table right there against ISanych in that second game, and that's gotta feel good.
We want to thank our MetaPlace website subscribers. Your contribution helps us keep the project sustainable. As we reach higher subscription goals, you are helping us cover more and more behind-the-scenes costs, such as video editing. Check out our subscription page using the link in the description, and remember to collect your perks. We will see you the next time.